Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I am so thrilled. We have Nick Lake, Printz Award-winning author of In Darkness, his new YA novel, There Will Be Lies. Well, Nick, welcome to Anderson's in Naperville.
Thank you.
Hey, it's great to have you here.
To be here.
Well, we love your book.
Amazing shop.
Well, thank you for saying that, but we're thrilled you're here too. So your new book, There Will Be Lies.
Yep.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's only been out since the 6th, I think, of January here.
Yeah.
So what are you hearing from your readers? Because this is so different than your
really
previous
different.
book. Yeah.
It's really different.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. People seem to like it, which is good. I'm very pleased because, you're always nervous when you do a new kind of book. And I think, there are common threads maybe to the books that I write in that they have, they're often about a character who's going through some kind of trauma. They often, they're about that character coming to terms with something, and there's maybe some note of redemption, but they're also extremely different in where they're set, and I'd never done a book with twists before, and I was nervous about how people would respond to the kind of, not so much to the twists, but particularly to the fantasy elements and to the dreaming and the fact that there's a talking coyote that
but
takes
that's one of the best parts
into this kind of fantasy world. And I've had to be completely honest, you get a little bit of kind of, a couple of people have said, I found that the dreaming bits were a bit slower and it maybe dragged a little bit compared to the sort of propulsive, like, cliffhanger chapter enders of the. But I liked it.
It was kind of like a break from that.
Well, that's what I wanted.
Because it was that's what I wanted something it was to be. Coming.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, right.
And really, all I can do is kind of do what I wanted to do, and I wanted it to have those, slower, more pensive kind of elements to it, and that feel of the stars and the night, because there's never sun in the dreaming, and just riding an elk across this primeval plain, and but I'd say for the most part people seem to have kind of taken that on board, the fact that it's a mix of contemporary thriller and fantasy, and they mostly seem to have enjoyed it, and what I'm really grateful for actually is people haven't given away certainly the biggest twist.
Well, and that's why we can't. We have to watch. We have to watch. We don't give. There's no spoilers here because we could spoil this very easily.
A lot of bloggers and people who've tweeted me about it have given away the first twist. Yeah. But I've been very pleased that people have found ways to not give the big twist.
Right. So being so different in this book, but where did the little seed for this story start to grow? Because each one of your books, like you said, are set in completely very different places, different characters. But you said there is this trauma, there is this a tragedy or something going on where they have to come to terms, and it's trying to figure out what is the truth, what are the lies, what in this book. The dreaming part of it and the otherworldly part of this, it's all trying to fit it all together and trying to figure something out. Because this book, to me, fits into multiple genres. It's a mystery, it's a thriller. Yeah. It is, in a way, it's kind of a spiritual book. It has so many ways you could fit it into mystical, that sort of thing. Yeah. And in the way that, when you think of, the mythical part of those Native American tribes and what they believed in and everything. So it's a lot of different things. But where did the seeds for all the elements that go into this story
Where did the various different seeds come from?
Yeah.
Well, the first and most obvious one was I was on a book tour. It was when In Darkness came out, and I was in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where the book starts anyway, in a hotel which was sort of on the north side of the city, quite close to the desert. And I was standing in the garden of the hotel late at night, kind of looking up at the stars, and it was one of those hotels with quite kind of extensive grounds, and I looked down and suddenly there was a coyote standing in front of me, literally probably not much further away from me than you are now. And it was looking at me, and I was looking at it, and in reality it probably lasted for about 1 second, but it felt like this kind of incredibly significant moment, and it felt like, I don't want to sound too pretentious about it, but it felt like a sort of moment where some sort of curtain was drawn aside, and it was like seeing some sort of secret mechanism behind the stage set of the world, and like I was kind of seeing something essential and and old and
Right.
mysterious. And I knew right away that I didn't know that the story of Shelby, but I knew that I was going to
Right.
have to do a story with a character who encountered this coyote, because Shelby meets the coyote when she's just been hit by a car, and the coyote says there will be two lies and then there will be the truth, and that will be the worst of all.
Right.
And so I started writing the book, and it ended up going into this world of the dreaming because of the coyote. That kind of spun out from that, I suppose, that interest in the mythology of that region. So that came from coyote, but also from, I guess, as you said, it's a story about someone piecing together who they are,
Right, yeah.
and what their place in the world is, and learning in a really literal sense who she is, but also in a sort of metaphysical sense. She's trying to become a person, she's trying to
Right.
grow up, she's trying to kind of come of age, she's trying to accept herself, and everything about that felt like it sort of resonated with myth. And I feel like so much of myth is about who we are as human beings and about kind of coming of age, and so it felt really natural on a number of levels to take her into this sort of mythic world of sort of, you know, there were references to Perry Mesa culture, to the Apaches, to the Yavapai, to the Navajo, all of whom were kind of in that region.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, but also, given that it's a story about someone whose life is turned upside down, it felt sort of appropriate to have that trickster character.
Right.
And Coyote's
Yeah,
just a classic
right.
trickster god
Exactly,
who comes
yeah.
into her life and creates chaos, but also, you know, there is this tradition in mythology of trickster gods turning things upside down, but ultimately perhaps creating a reality that is in some way, you know, more wonderful or more exciting. And there's this Apache story about coyotes scattering the stars because they were meant to be in very neat
Yeah.
rows, and he took the blanket they were on and scattered them.
Right, right.
And that whole idea of, you know, disruption, and then finally, partly, I just really wanted to do a story with a twist. I'd never
Yeah.
done one. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know whether I could do it, and I guess I like to challenge myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, can I write a story with a twist? And actually, how do you do that? And
Yeah.
the best way to figure out how to do it is to try to do it. And,
Yeah. And you did. This
Yeah.
was good. This was
and it
good.
turns out the key to writing a story with a twist is knowing what the truth is, and then
and then working backwards in
Yeah.
a way. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Well, you know, talk about trickster stories and so much of and I think of like Neil Gaiman's, you know, like the Anansi
American
Boy,
Gods and
American
Anansi
Gods, and
Boys,
Anansi Boy.
yeah,
And you think
yeah.
of the trickster
Yeah.
in those kind of stories,
Yeah.
and they really do help you come to the truth in yourself
Yeah,
in
yeah.
so many
Yeah.
ways. And I think that's what happens to Shelby, you know, in this story. And it's so hard to talk about this book because you don't want to give it away.
We can't say.
Yeah,
what
we
the
can't
truth
say what
about
happens, but
Shelby
you know,
is, yeah.
but Shelby, you know, Shelby's 17 years old.
She is.
You know, she's homeschooled. Her mom's kind of protective, overbearing in some ways.
Overprotective. you
Yeah,
might say.
overprotective
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And but she gets hit by a car.
She does.
And she has severe injuries to her ankle, her leg, and all
Yeah,
this kind of stuff.
yeah.
But her mother all of a sudden just says they're going on a road trip.
Yeah.
They're going to go on a trip,
Yeah.
and basically has packed suitcases
Yeah.
and everything
Yeah.
in the car,
Yeah.
and they go.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should give anything away, but a little something about what she thought about her father ends up.
She
not
says,
being,
yeah, she.
Yeah.
I think we can say that. So
Yes, we can say this
Shelby thinks that her father's dead, and
Yes.
she wakes up in the hospital having been hit by the car.
Right.
The coyote having said there will be two lies and then there will be the truth.
Right.
And she gives her real name at the hospital, and her mother whisks her away and puts her in this car with all their belongings and says, actually, your father isn't dead.
Yeah.
And because he will now be able to see from hospital records that you've been here, we have to go on the run because he's going to come and find us and kill us.
Right.
And that's a lie.
Right.
So that's
right.
the first
Okay, that's a lie.
that
So
the
no more. We
coyote
can't.
wants.
We don't want to give too much more.
And
away.
ultimately you find out the truth.
Right,
But
but we-
that is not the truth.
Right. So we can talk around
Yeah,
all this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, you talk about almost this myth and legend and this stuff that you know, the tricksters of these different traditions. How much research did you do? Because obviously you did, and you do it for all of your books. Because whether
Yeah.
it's Somali parts and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and in Darkness talking
Yeah.
about what happened in Haiti
Yeah.
with the earthquake and
Yeah.
everything. So what kind of research did you do for There Will Be Lies?
So this was a really interesting one because I probably actually have just given the impression that I right at the beginning wanted it to be about this sort of trickster thing.
Yeah.
I guess the truth is it very much came from that personal meeting with the coyote, and I wrote the scene where she's hit by the car, she sees the coyote gives her this warning, And I then wrote probably about a third or half of the book, and I had Coyote taking her into this dreaming world. And then it was only once I was really quite far into the book that I discovered that there is this, I think it's actually a patchy, particularly idea that if a coyote crosses your path, it means that your life is going to be in some way disrupted, or you're going to die, or you're going to be badly injured, or you're going to suffer bad luck. And that was really spooky, because it just felt like that was precisely the role this coyote was playing in this story. And it turned out that actually there was this kind of legend about it. And so that then drove me to try to find out a lot more about it, and read a lot of Navajo myths and Apache myths, and kind of read about the Perry Mesa culture. And that then led to bringing the elk paintings into it, and the whole world of the elks, because originally actually they were horses in the dreaming. And then I realized that, of course, you know, there's this notion that Native Americans had horses, but they actually didn't have horses until the Europeans came along. So I changed them to elks. So it was a really weird kind of coincidence. And another even weirder one is that I had in the very early draft, I'd already decided that the crone in the dreaming, I guess I should explain, the coyote takes Shelby into the dreaming and says, there's a crone in this world, and everything is dry and desiccated, and the elks can't eat because the grass is all brown, because the crone has stopped it from raining. And he says, ordinarily I would be able to make it rain, but I can't, because the crone has captured the first child, and that has disrupted the balance, and therefore I can't make it rain, and so you have to destroy the crone and kill the crone, basically, who lives in this castle. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I put that in because I just thought it was a nice, and I don't think this is giving too much away. It was a nice echo to the real world, because I had Shelby's mother saying to her that she'd moved them to Arizona because she hated the rain. They were originally in Alaska. And I thought, well, if her mother hates the rain and the crone hates the rain, then there's a nice kind of echo there. And then, this was all before I then started doing all this research into kind of these Native American myths of that area. I then read that in, and I think this time it's Navajo. In Navajo tradition, Coyote is given power over the rain, so Coyote is the one who can make it rain, and that was what I had written in the book. So that was so spooky, and probably the most spooky thing that has ever happened when I've written a book. That I just happened to make him in charge of the rain, and then it turned out he was. That was weird.
See, I love these sections of the book. I really did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad.
And it, you know, because Shelby, you know, this character, you know, she's kind of snarky. She's very sarcastic, and sometimes you're not sure if you like her so much.
No.
And I think sort of these forays when she's in the dreaming, and she's becoming a different kind of person.
Yeah, she is. And she's sort of facing trials which are relevant to what's going on in the real world.
But I think it happens to all of us when we're teens. We go through so much of this.
And really it's all the same story, because you know, most likely what's happening in the dreaming is in her head.
Right.
It's how she's internalizing all this. And it's because she knows things that she doesn't realize. You know, unconsciously she knows the truth that you find out at the end of the book. I think, anyway.
So I want to know how you got her voice, because here you are. You were born in Britain. You grew up in Luxembourg, and now you're doing an American 17-year-old girl. So how did you get this voice? Because I find in all your books where you're talking about a Haitian boy named Shorty who's, you know, he's stuck in the rubble of a building from an earthquake, and then another book, another girl who's been kidnapped, her family, by Somali Park. How do you channel these voices? Because you nail them. These voices.
Thank you.
So I want to know how, because voice is so important to carry you through a story.
The voice is the story to me. I'm kind of, the voice is where I start, and I sort of, there are a few answers to this. There's sort of, partly I think, and this is potentially going to make me sound crazy, the character is very real to me, and they sort of live in my head, and they tell the story through me. And I really hesitate to say that, because I used to not believe people when they talked about that. You know, you occasionally hear a musician say, like, the music comes through me, And I don't want to come across like I consider myself some kind of artist, but it really does. Like,
yeah, right.
Shelby spoke the story in my head, and I just wrote it down. I mean, there are practical elements as well in that, there are things I suspect, like I suspect that my upbringing has something to do with the fact that I find it slightly easier to write American characters, because even though I'm English, I didn't grow up in England, and in Luxembourg, where I was, literally all the TV we watched was American TV, because we had a channel called RTL Channel 4, which was Dutch, which had Beverly Hills 90210 with Dutch subtitles, or all kinds of American TV that we watched. So I watched very little British dialogue growing up. So I think particularly when I'm writing in the first person, I tend to sound quite American anyway.
Okay.
But the girl, I mean, Shelby, in terms of her specific voice, which hopefully sounds different to Amy's voice in Hostage 3, who is also half American.
Right.
I don't know. It was
easy
because it's Shelby. She's a different person, and she's
that's so
she's
interesting.
real.
Yeah,
and maybe part of it is tricking yourself into believing that the character is real. But to me, it doesn't feel like a trick. I just feel like she is.
Right.
Which is just kind of crazy. But
Yeah. What was your favorite scene to write, or what you're hearing from readers?
My absolute favourite scene in the book, by far, and it's the scene that it sounds really mean, but it made my editor cry both times she read it, and I was so glad it did, because I wanted it to be really powerful, is a scene, once again, I can't really describe it because of the twist, but I kind of can. It's a scene where they're in the, you'll probably recognise it, it's a scene where they're in the parking lot of a motel, and her mother says something to her, and she replies, and it's hopefully fairly obvious what it doesn't say what they're saying, but I think it's fairly obvious, and that scene to me is the kind of the heart of the whole book.
I know. That is a very good scene. Very good scene. Can't talk about it though. So, winning the Printz Award, you won the Printz Award for In Darkness.
I did.
And knowing that is the top award that the American Library Association awards to young adult fiction, how did that feel? And you're an editor, you're a publisher with Harper in the UK. Well, what did that feel like winning that award? And was it hard now writing after that to know that I got this incredible recognition?
You should say that. I just didn't believe it. I mean, I just, for the longest time, I just thought someone was playing some kind of prank on me, because it's very and the whole way that award is set up kind of encourages that, because you're not told that you're on any kind of shortlist. It's not like we have the Carnegie Prize in the UK, which is sort of the equivalent, and there's a publicly announced long list, and then there's a publicly announced short list, and then the winner is chosen, and it's all very
like the National Book Award here. We do that.
You sort of you know that you're on, and so with the Printz, you have no idea. Like, nobody tells you anything, and presumably the publishers give them your phone number, because what happens is you just get I mean, I'm sure lots of people know this, but you just get a call, and here in America, the thing is that you get a call at breakfast, because it's usually at sort of breakfast time. I actually got the call in the afternoon because I was in the UK, and I live really far from London, but I work in London, so I work some of the time at home and some of the time in the office, and I was working at home at my desk, and the phone rang, and there was a load of American voices on a speakerphone saying, "Is that Nick Loeb?" And I was like, yes. And I genuinely assumed that it was my colleagues from Harper US for some reason, and there was some conference call I'd forgotten about. So I was like, who is this? And they told me that I'd won the Printz Award, and it was just like, I think I unfortunately swore.
I think that's a great response.
I said, "You are something," kidding me, or words to that effect, and then I said, which apparently is the wrong thing to say, "Are you sure you wouldn't rather give it to someone else?" And I gave the name of a very famous YA author, and they said, I remember the precise words they used. They said, "We're comfortable with our decision." And I said, "Okay, well then if I can't give it back, then fine." And then my daughter, who at the time was, I think about 18 months old, called from the next room and said, "Daddy, I've done a poo." So that brought me down to earth with a
There you go.
with a bang.
Love it.
But even then, like probably a week afterwards, I was just like, well, "This can't be real. They don't. Why? Well, this is crazy."
Yeah.
I know your other question. Nobody has asked that, but it's a really good question. The pressure is horrible
When you're moving on and writing your next book.
Particularly, I guess, because actually what I really want to do is basically thrillers, but with a bit of a kind of, hopefully a bit of a kind of literary depth to them. But, you know, Hostage 3 and There Will Be Lies are essentially thrillers. Yeah. And I guess that I feel a little bit anxious about, because, you know, the Printz is, I suppose, has a slightly more literary connotation, and then I get anxious, like, well, how are people going to respond to these books, which are kind of maybe a bit more of a thriller story than people might be expecting from someone who's won the Printz. But, you know, all I can do is the stories that are in my head.
And that's what we want from you. Yeah. So no pressure,
good,
okay?
Good.
Stop the pressure. So In Darkness, though, was published in the UK as an adult book, was it not? Or
it was published as both.
Both.
So, yeah.
Oh, so it was simultaneous as young adult and
it had,
adult.
and I never remember which way around it was. It was basically the same cover, but one of them was yellow and one of them was red.
I love the cover on that.
And one was the adult edition and one was the. To be honest, I don't think that worked particularly well. It's very hard with bookstores to get them to take both editions of a book. Yeah. But I think they just. I didn't know, and my agent didn't know, and Bloomsbury didn't know whether it was for teenagers or for adults. You know, we just didn't know.
Well, I think it's great for both.
So
it's
they
such a great
tried to do it for both.
Yeah. So being an editor and working in the publishing world, and now being a writer,
yes,
are you more difficult on yourself? And working.
I thought you were going to say, "Are you more difficult on your publishers?" Which is something
too.
some people ask.
So that was my next question. Are you hard on Bloomsbury, knowing what you do for your own publisher?
No, I think I'm the opposite. I think I'm
just wondering, how does that experience inform both?
Because I'm sort of, you know, I've experienced my share of difficult authors as an editor, and I desperately do not want to be that person. Yeah. And so I kind of, I'm very, you know, conscious of not turning into a nightmare author, and possibly even sometimes slightly too much. You know, I'm maybe sometimes even too kind of treading on eggshells when I'm saying, I'm not sure that I like that cover for the book or whatever. But no, it makes me very anxious. Yeah. And what was the first part of the question?
Well, it was part of how has either experience informed, you know, your job as an editor, but also as an author, because you're seeing things from both sides. Now, you know?
To me, they're sort of extensions of the same thing, and often people consider them to be very different, and people will use this expression, which maybe is an English expression, of poacher turned gamekeeper. I don't know if you say that as well. But
no, no. I think that's a good way to play it.
Yeah. And to me, that's not right. It isn't sort of opposites. It's actually the same thing. And you know, often if you're an editor, and actually probably a lot of people don't know this, but you know, editors will sometimes actually be coming up with stories, and then they'll be commissioning an author to write that story, and sometimes even, you know, writing quite a detailed synopsis of that story. Or, you know, they might be commissioning a story and giving comments to the author on their first draft and helping to sort of shape the story and make it the best story it can be. But both of those things, whether you're conceiving a story or editing someone else's story, have a huge overlap with what you're doing as an author. You know, I say to people that they're the same thing, but being an editor is just a lot easier. Because when you're an editor, someone else has to write the story, and you then get to just give them some tips on how to make it hopefully better, and then they have to go away and do all the work. When you're an author, you have to write the first draft. Then someone else gives you tips, and you have to go away and write the second draft. So I'd much rather be an editor if I could choose, but sadly, the writing part is not a choice. I just kind of have to
you have
do
those
it.
voices that need to be written.
Well, quite, I have to get them out of my head.
You have to get them out of your head.
And onto the page. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned what you're working on now a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's called Whisper to Me. And actually, I've broken it at the moment because I'm trying to edit it. And I'm really hoping I can fix it again. But when it's fixed, it's going to be the story of this girl called Cassie who lives in a kind of rundown town on the coast of New Jersey, which bears a lot of similarity to the rundown town on the coast of New Jersey where I worked for a summer when I was 19, delivering plush to the concession stands at an amusement park.
Wow.
Which is what the boy in the book does.
Okay.
So I've given him my job. And Cassie, there's a serial killer in the town who is killing young women, sex workers essentially. And there's a kind of widespread belief that the police are not doing enough about it because of their profession, etc., etc. This is kind of in the background, but then Cassie finds a human foot which is washed up on the beach, and it turns out to be the foot of one of these girls who's gone missing because nobody's ever found a body. And she then starts to hear this voice which is not there, and it appears to her when she's in the police, she's taken to the police station to be kind of interviewed about finding this foot. And she's looking in the mirror in the bathroom, and this voice starts to speak to her, and it tells her she's disgusting. It says, "You're disgusting." And the voice is really, really not nice to her. And she kind of responds by telling the voice to go away, and it escalates, and to the point where her dad realizes something is going wrong. And so it's and she becomes convinced that the voice is the voice of one of these women who's gone missing, and that it's a ghost, and that therefore what she has to do is find this serial killer. And it's not, there's no twist. Like It's not the voice of a girl who's gone. She is basically having, mental issues, and the story. So that's kind of part of the story, but then the whole conceit of the story is that the entire book is an email which she is writing to this boy. She doesn't meet the boy until after she started hearing the voice, and she tells him right at the start that she has hurt him in some way, and she says, once you've read this, you will understand why I did what I did, and if you forgive me, please meet me on the pier at 5 o'clock on Friday. And then she tells him the whole story, and she tells him how they met, but her side of it, and why she did the things she did, and in the hope that he will then meet her. And then right at the end, it just says the last line of the book is "send." So she sends the email.
So when do you think we'll be able to have this book?
I believe there are going to be advanced reader copies, as you call them in America, in May, and then publishing May 16, I think.
What do you call advanced readers' copies in the UK?
We call them proofs.
Oh, proofs.
Which is really confusing because we also use the word proofs about proofs, which are the page proofs.
Yeah. Or manuscripts. Manuscripts, galleys. Yeah. Now they're arcs.
Yeah. There's all kinds of words.
I know. Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, Nick, thank you so much. It's been great talking with you. Congratulations on There Will Be Lies.
Thank you so much.
Wow, what a great conversation with Nick Lake. This is a book that will have twists you won't predict. It's called There Will Be Lies. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.